Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the first and probably a lengthy series of training packages that have been assembled for use by the Arizona Rangers Tombstone Company. I was originally intending to go through this training during our August meeting, but since the air conditioning was not working properly, I was unable to do that. So instead, I'm going to repackage this in a format where you can access it any time. This will remain on my own YouTube channel, and you can certainly refer back to this at any time. So with that, we're going to spend the next few moments talking about supervision and management. As with all of our training here at the Arizona Rangers, it is adopted from Post standards. And in this case, it's been adopted from Arizona Post Performance Objective number 1.4, which is to be able to identify and understand various aspects of supervision and management. Now, the Arizona Rangers is like any other organization. It has to be properly supervised and managed. Otherwise, things are not going to be done properly, and there's always that possibility that people can become injured. They can even get killed in some circumstances, and there's a possibility that you as a ranger and the organization can be sued. As I've mentioned in previous trainings, it's relatively easy to win a lawsuit because it only requires 51% or a preponderance of the evidence. So by following these various principles of supervision and management, you will know exactly where your command is, who is supposed to be in command, and who is supposed to be giving orders. So that way there's no guessing as to who has legitimate authority in any given situation. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. The performance objectives for this particular unit of training are going to be the following. Number one, you're going to be able to identify the chain of command. And I'll be explaining these in just a few moments. Secondly, you're going to be able to identify those reporting requirements that appear in Ranger policy and procedure. And third, you're going to be able to identify the concept of span of control and why it's particularly useful. So the next question is, what is a chain of command? If you're to look at any military manual or any business manual, you'll find that a chain of command is defined as, and there may be some variation, but the thought is the same, the order in which authority and power in an organization is wielded and delegated. In other words, who's in charge? Who do I report to? Power and authority flow from top management to every employee at every level of the organization. If you've ever seen an organizational chart, you'll see that there's usually one person at the top, and they have several people that answer to him, and in turn, that's middle management, and in turn, middle management has people that report to them. So power and authority flow from top management to every employee at every level of the organization. The same is true with the Rangers. Even though we're not employees and don't get a check, we still have people who are in charge. Instructions flow downward along the chain of command, and accountability flows upward. And in the next few moments, you're going to see the organizational chart of the Tombstone Company, and you'll see graphically how that works. The idea is that the clearer the chain of command, the more effective the decision-making process and the greater the efficiency. So what if we just had one person in charge? we have roughly 40 to 45 people in this particular company. And as a result, if we have one person in charge, then you have 45 people either all going to the company commander, or all 40 to 45 people are wondering, who's the boss? Who's in charge? Who do I ask about this? What kind of decision should I make? Now, in organizations like the one I've just described, it's often difficult to identify who is in charge. Well, it also makes accountability very difficult. It also places a disproportionate amount of accountability on both the ranger and the commander. And so you have rangers that operate and have no idea what's going on. And so they end up making mistakes, bad things happen. The next thing that happens, somebody's getting charged, somebody's getting sued, somebody's getting hurt, someone got killed. So by having a chain of command where everybody knows who they report to, we tend to have a much more effective and efficient organization. And people can do a better job, and they're less likely to either get hurt, get criminally charged, or get sued. Now compare chain of command versus span of control. Span of control, as any management textbook will tell you, is the number of people that a supervisor can effectively supervise. Going back to that previous example of 40 to 45 people, no chain of command except for the company commander, can a company commander, or can any commander, effectively supervise 45 people at a time? They can't. Typically, according to most business manuals and Arizona Post, 6 to 8 persons is generally recommended, although for short periods of time it could be more. But generally speaking, 6 to 8 people is considered to be an adequate span of control. Now, there's a lot of people who may think this is just being lazy on the part of the commander, but it's really not true. What happens is the commander delegates his authority to various supervisory ranks, or he'll name an officer in charge, and that person is operating under the delegated authority of the company commander. So, for example, for those who've been in the Marine Corps and they've ever seen 3 lance corporals picking up cigarette butts in a given garrison area, one of those 3 lance corporals is the officer in charge. So you could have 3 people of equal rank or people of lesser rank in charge of a detail, because they're operating under the authority and direction of the officer, of the company commander. That's why when there's a situation that requires clarification, those people go to the officer in charge. And it's the officer in charge who makes that decision. In this organization, effective August 1st, we have the following reporting structure. The company commander directly supervises the executive officer, the internal affairs officer, and the treasurer. These 3 directly report to the company commander. In turn, there are different parts of the company, or different middle managers, usually sergeants, that will report to these officials. For example, the sergeant at arms, the public information officer, and the duty sergeants will report to First Lieutenant Whiting, who is our executive officer. Our internal affairs officer, Lieutenant Spoto, will have the internal affairs sergeant, training officers, and the recruiter directly report to Lieutenant Spoto. Lieutenant Lant, who is our treasurer, will have the quartermaster, the chaplain, and the museum curator, as well as any museum docent, will report to Lieutenant Lant. The rangers, in turn, will report to the sergeants as necessary. For example, if the rangers have an internal affairs related matter, they would go to the internal affairs sergeant. If they have a training matter, they would go to a training officer. If the rangers had a public information question or a duty related question, it would go to the duty sergeant. Otherwise, when they're in charge of a duty, or rather when they're assigned to a duty, that will be handled a little bit differently. We're going to see how that is handled in just a moment. What is the difference between chain of command and span of control? Chain of command states the following. Each individual only has one supervisor or boss that they are accounting for, or rather that they have to account to. That individual in turn has a supervisor or boss, and this continues to the top of the organization. So what this means is there's no more command shopping. There's no longer any doubt as to who's in charge and who's giving the orders. Now, with that said, what was it like prior to that? Well, if you have an organization that has a company commander and nobody else, and nobody knows what's going on, oftentimes people go to the person with the highest rank. That may not necessarily be the right person to go to. For example, in Tombstone, our company has at least two majors at state level. If you'll notice, those state level majors are not named in the organizational chart. So what does that mean? Unless those people are designated as officers in charge, they're not the ones giving the orders. They're not the ones supervising. You can't command shop. You have to go to either an officer in charge. If there is no officer in charge designated, you have to go to the commander. So let's look at some operational command issues. We have a number of duties that occur. Each duty shall have an officer in charge who is designated by the company commander. Those rangers that are assigned to that detail then answer to the officer in charge. As I mentioned before, we have a number of people who are majors at state level. Just because they're a major does not necessarily mean they are an officer in charge. In fact, according to Colonel Droll and our guiding documents, those state officers are rangers within that company, unless the company commander decides otherwise. The designation of an officer in charge may be for just for the duration of the assignment, or if it's an ongoing assignment, it may be an ongoing designation. We have at least 2 ongoing assignments, and they are school security and courts. Those 2 ongoing assignments have officers in charge who are already delegated by the company commander. For example, the court security ongoing assignment has an officer in charge, and that is going to be Captain Saya. Captain Saya has divided the court security into 2 teams, Team Alpha and Team Bravo. Those 2 teams will have team leaders that are designated by Captain Saya. Both of these teams have at least 1 major as part of the team. Just by virtue of their rank does not mean that these people are officers in charge. The officer in charge of those assignments are designated by the captain. This is all part of our governing documents. In the case of school security, the officer in charge is designated as Lieutenant Spoto. Lieutenant Spoto in turn has 2 security teams in the school, Team A and Team B. Lieutenant Spoto will designate who the security team leaders are. That way, there's 1 boss, and this completely eliminates any doubt and any command shopping. Now that we've discussed supervision and management in the Arizona Ranger Company level, let's discuss some reporting requirements. If you're unable to report to any assignment on time, or you are absent, or you're going to be absent from any assignment, Article 10 of the Ranger Code of Conduct, as well as General Policy and Procedure number 013.128, requires the ranger who's going to be late or absent to notify the officer in command. If there is no officer in command available, or there is no officer in command that is designated, you are required to report to the company commander per General Policy and Procedure 013.128. You must notify those persons within 24 hours or in an emergency as soon as practical. So what does that mean? That basically means if you're unable to make your scheduled duty at least 24 hours prior to the start of that duty, the OIC or company commander must be notified. Or if it suddenly happens, like for example, you find yourself getting food poisoning, as soon as practical, notify the company commander or the officer in charge. To notify the company commander, or rather, there's other reporting requirements as well. General Policy and Procedure 013.131 also requires the ranger to notify the company commander about anything that impacts or concerns the organization. This is pretty broad. If something's going on, the company commander needs to know about it. There are also some specific requirements as well, such as if you are involved in a law enforcement investigation in any way, if you end up being a witness in a law enforcement investigation, if you end up being a suspect, if you are detained by another law enforcement agency, if you are questioned by a law enforcement agency, you must notify the company commander. Speaking as a company commander, I would rather know from you than to get a telephone call from the police. If you are a witness in a criminal investigation, you should be writing a report and I should be getting it. If you're licensed because suspended, revoked, denied, etc., you must notify the company commander. If you receive a traffic citation, again, you must notify the company commander. With that said, company commanders have the ability to query court records and may do so on a random basis. It would be better if the company commander knew from you than from one of these random checks. When you notify the company commander, you may be required to submit a written report. And again, General Policy and Procedure 013.126 and the Ranger Code of Conduct, Article 15, Section C, requires written reports. So if the company commander says, I need a report, then you need to complete a report. To make a report to the company commander in the Tombstone Company as of the present time, you may telephone or text message me at the following number, 520-261-0490. If there is no answer, leave a message as your call will be returned, usually within 10 minutes. If the call is not returned in that time, try again. You can also email the company commander by emailing me at tseguin@arizonarangers.gov. So why is this important? Some of you folks may feel this is just another burden and I'm a volunteer and I shouldn't have to do this. Well, there's reasons why these rules are in place. And these rules have been in place for as long as you have quite likely been in this company. This is important because we may be complying with contractual obligations. There may be paid duties that are involved. If we fail to provide the requisite amount of people during a paid duty, then the company is liable. It also assures that you comply with our Arizona Ranger governing documents. When you join the company, you promise to obey all of our governing documents. And if you've been to ARDA, chances are you've received a copy of these governing documents. If you have not, you should be contacting me immediately, and I'll make sure that you get them. It also provides evidence of compliance with federal and state law, because there are certain situations that will require reporting. Last but not least, it protects you in the event of a civil litigation or criminal investigation. If you were aware of something and you failed to report it to the company commander or the officer in charge, you may be sued. In some cases, you may be prosecuted criminally, especially if it involves children, the elderly, or any other identified vulnerable population. This is not something that you want to be a part of. If in doubt, check with your officer in charge. If you have no officer in charge, check with the company commander. Better to make that phone call than to be investigated or indicted. This concludes our discussion of supervision management and reporting requirements for the Arizona Rangers. This is all based on our governing documents on Google Drive. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, the first place to go is to look at our general policy and procedure, our code of conduct, and our other governing documents. Everybody has access to those. If you are unable to access those documents, contact me. If you still have questions, contact me by email or text message or telephone. If you have no questions, I will have a few of my own. To check to see whether or not you have learned the material that I've just presented, I have a short test for you at this web link. This web link will also be included in the email that has the link to this instructional package. It's roughly 6 questions long. The passing score is 80 points. You can take the test as many times as you want until you have achieved a passing score. So with that, stay safe until we see you again next month.